Okay, one last thing to take care of, and if we just open up the console once again and take a look at what we're working with here, I'll just refresh the page, make sure there's nothing hanging around from a previous demo. And if we click on bad GUID, then if we take a look at the request we're sending to the server, we can see that the GET request, the not a GUID, is returning a 400 bad request, but it's actually hitting our validation response handler in our agent.ts file. And when we send up something that's not a GUID, then our API is just going to fail it on validation. And if we want to see the full error response there, then if we go back to our test error components, and where we've got handle bad GUID function, let's just take a look at the error directly, because this is coming from our, if we look at the agent.ts, then it's this that we're going to be hitting, because it's going to have something in the data errors. And in fact, just for complete clarity, I'm just going to log out the console response temporarily here so that we can actually see the full error response, because the code and the logic we've had it in here makes it tricky to get the response, in fact. So let's take a look. And I'm just going to repeat that request, and let's take a look at what we see. So we can see our validation response there, but from the console.log where we're getting the full response, even though this should really return to us a not found because we don't have an activity with this ID, because we've specified a GUID as our field, then our API is trying to be a little bit too clever, and it's just telling us that this is not a GUID, so it's not even going to try and get to the database. It's going to stop us at the validation level. Now that's fine, but what I would prefer is to send the user to the not found component in the event that we get this kind of response, because somehow they've managed to make a request without using a valid GUID for our activities. I don't know how they could achieve that just by using our user interface as designed, but if they were using something like Postman, then they would see this kind of validation error. So we can get around this anyway, and what we'll do is we'll just add some logic in there to test for this, and if we do see this kind of error, then we're going to redirect them to the 404. So what we can do to achieve that is just add some additional logic in the 400 case. And what we want to test for is we want to see what method was used in the request, because when we're getting an activity, then we'll be using a get method, but we'll also get the config from our error response here as well. So we'll also add this destructured property into our error response. Let's just remove that console log. Before I forget, we don't need this. And what we'll do in this if statement, we'll check to see the config.method. And we'll check to see if it's equal to get. And what we'll also test for is the data.errors, and we'll check to see if it has own property, and we're going to look for the ID property. And if we meet this condition, then what we're going to use is history.push, and we're going to pass them to the not-found components. And that's all we're going to do. And if we go back and test once again, just refresh this page, and we'll click on bad GUID, and this time we get sent to our not found component, and that's what we're looking to achieve. However, by doing this, we have actually broken one of our other errors, and if we click on the bad request, we don't actually see the toast anymore. So we've broken the flow of what we're doing inside our agent.ts file. And what we want to do, instead of using an else statement here for the data, if it's just a string, what we'll do is we'll move this check up to the top. And what we'll do, we'll just say if type of data is equal to, and then we'll just put in a string. Then what we'll do is we'll say toast.error and pass data in. And this should resolve this so that all of our 400 errors now will work as we want them to. And I'll just go back and refresh this page. And if we click on bad request, we see the toast. If we click on validation error, we see the validation errors. And if we click on bad GUID, we get taken to the not found page. So we're done, finally. Quite a big section this, and there's quite a lot of work to setting this thing up in terms of error handling on both the API and error handling on the client side. But now we've done this piece of work, it makes it so much easier to develop our application now, because we don't need to spend too much time thinking about error handling because we've got everything going on centrally, or as much as we can do at the moment. So what we'll do, just to clean things up, because you may or may not have created some bad data in your API, and what we'll do just to make sure that we're all starting from the same clean place is we'll just reset our database. So what we'll do is we'll stop our API from running. An important step, we'll cd up into the reactivities folder, and we'll say .NET EF database drop, and we'll specify the startup project as the API and the project that contains our data context as the persistence. And we'll press return. And I'm going to say yes. You don't have to do this, by the way, but I am going to do this to clean up my database. And then all we need to do to get ourselves back to where we were before with clean data is simply restart our application. So I'll say .NET watch run and press return. And this should go ahead and seed all of the data back into the database. And if I refresh the page on the activities dashboard, then we should find that we've got all of our activities that we originally started with back in our database. So we're back to a clean place. And because we've come to the end of this particular section, what we're also going to do is commit our changes into source control. So I'm just going to stage the changes. I'm going to say end of section 10, Command and Enter, and then push these up to GitHub. And we'll wrap up this section with a summary.